Hello, it's Tuesday, 12:30 on a beautiful Tuesday again. I'm so excited for you to be joining us today for another episode of the Mindset Michelle TV show. I'm so excited that you're joining us on this special day, especially where we look at this interesting question around purpose in terms of spirituality and religion. And my extra special guest today is Andrew St. John. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, nice to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you on the show, Andrew. And it's especially important for me and for the show to have people that come from different backgrounds, different angles, and different life experiences. And from the time I've known you, Andrew, you've had such an incredible life experience with all of the different travel and working here in Australia and overseas. And also, of course, all of the different types of roles that you've been having. But rather than me talk about those different roles, do you want to just share with people a little bit about what your background and your experience has been in those roles and in the different countries that you lived in?
Okay, I'll try not to be long-winded. I think it began when I was about 3.5. I was born overseas. My parents emigrated to Australia. I lived all over the country at various times. I can remember mountains of sugarcane in North Queensland, thick brown. They were different then. And the odd snake visiting in a house calls. And then I moved to various states and lots of schools. I think I went to about 11 primary schools in all. Eventually got into the army after high school. I did my leaving certificate in the army and then went to tech college and eventually got into a master's program in California. But in between all that, 6 years in the army, I traveled to New Guinea, New Zealand, Singapore, Malaysia, and I lived in Malaysia for 3 years. So I got to experience, that would be another culture. But in Malaysia, it's a series of cultures that are overlaid and collectively there. For example, they celebrate all the public holidays for every religion. So every month there's a holiday of some form. But I learned to speak a few languages because I have a language aptitude. And so that was always fun. I went to California in the early 80s. I wanted to see what they were doing. I ended up in the university for a few years and extra certification with different people, different organizations. Along the way, I started to work on myself, as you can imagine, particularly who am I, what am I doing, what is the grand purpose of my life anyway? You know, it's a funny thing, but you ask anyone, including me, what are you doing in your life? What's your intention? What do you know? And mostly people will say, well, it's something I'm here to do. It's important, but I don't know what it is.
And that's a really interesting question to kind of come up with after that really interesting lifestyle of, you know, the Australian Army in Malaysia and working in a university in California. What do you think then with all of those different places around the world that you've lived and the different types of jobs that you've had, what do you think then that you define for yourself as success? What is it that now looking back and being retired, what do you think success now means to you?
Well, I think it's ideally stated in terms of knowing yourself. Shakespeare said it, man, know thyself. Most people hear that and go, oh, here I am, self. No, that's not the self he meant. He was talking about the inner self. So then that's a mystery. Life is a bit like a puzzle. You know, the puzzles you buy in a box, got a picture on the outside, tell you what it looks like. We all have a puzzle box.
So
but we forget.
The definition of success then is more around that knowing your inner self and
getting to know yourself, and also learning what you do, what motivates you, how do you function, what's important. Like for me, empathy was high on the list of acquiring. I realized this as a young soldier that I was indestructible, like all of us. But essentially, the empathy level wasn't too high. When I started working with people in one form or another, that's when I realized the need for the empathy, because you see, the better the empathy, the better the intuition works. And perception is not the same as intuition. So learning the difference and how they apply, that made a difference to me when I work with someone in a personal setting. My intuitive lead matters a lot. And often that means that in that setting, the success of it is how well am I able to support that person? And often I'm aware of things about what they're dealing with before they are. Now, that sort of empathy. And
also, Andrew, though, going from recognizing when you're in the army that your empathy was maybe one of those areas that you could develop and would help you later on. What do you think it was? Was it that as you were learning to work with people, you recognized that that was a skill area you needed to develop and work on?
Well, you see, as I grew, I was in boarding school a lot. That's always fun, but I didn't like it. And I tended to withdraw a little because of it. However, the box of puzzles I mentioned, all the pieces are in it. You just don't know what they are. But life, to me, gradually edges you towards puzzle solution, because that's the function. So the things that come in your life that are positive, negative, nudge you. They nudge you. Some of that's due to past lives and the karma that's still around from that you still need to fulfill and complete on. Others are new opportunities that you can look towards and grow towards. But see, there's a saying out there that you might have heard, awareness is curative. If you know about something, you can deal with it. If you don't know, you can't.
I heard that many years ago, that the first step to healing, if you like, is actually the awareness about that there's an issue. So that's why I was interested in why, as a soldier in the army, you're even still aware at that point that empathy was one of those self-awarenesses that you needed or could develop.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you see, I was probably a little bit blessed as a very young boy and a young teenager. I had a lot of inner experiences. For example, when I was 4.5 up in North Queensland in the cane fields, I woke up one night, but I was out of my body. I was floating around near the ceiling, and I could see myself in bed asleep. And I thought, wow, I wonder what's going on. But I couldn't discuss it with anyone. There was no one to talk to about it. So that remained as an awareness of what was that? What was it pointing to? Well, I've had a lot of other experiences since in out of the body and transitory through other frequencies and dimensions that you learn to recognize. And then you know where you are, and that's the awareness you have then. So if you then wake up there someday, you go, oh, I know where I am. Whereas ignorance says, I don't know where I am. Something weird's going on. So I've made it a job to learn that.
Yeah, and I think that that's really interesting, because different people have different spiritual, religious, whatever label they want to place on that, types of experiences. But one of the things I'm fascinated about, and we can kind of tie into the tips for creating a successful mindset, especially around this integrating your spiritual, religious, whatever you want to call it, self with your everyday life, is for people like yourself that I know that have actually lived in a very spirit-focused and directed life. What sort of tips do you think are important for people to remember when, you know, there's so much conversation about purpose, and you need your purpose and this purpose and that purpose, but I don't hear as much about the inner purpose and finding your inner calling, or your inner call to a spiritual higher self or a religious whatever higher self. So for those people out there that are possibly watching today and hearing us talk, what are some of the tips for them in particular about following that inner calling? You know, if they wake up and discover that they're floating on the ceiling or something, what sort of tips would you give?
First of all, it's important that we don't mix religion with spirit. Because if you look at all the religions in the world, they have a positive place. So we're not critiquing any of them. However, they don't actually give you the keys, because belief doesn't do it. Your mind doesn't know how to do it. So you're born with a blank mind. The unconscious is full of stuff. But believing in something doesn't make it so. Otherwise, I could say, well, look, you believe you can fly, go ahead. And you can't. So therefore you go, well, that's not enough. You have to be able to transport, transcend, come to a place where you can know how to step out of the physical body and then look around to see how what you're now aware of matches to the belief systems that you've been given since you were less than a year old by others. And those belief systems are often founded on traditions. Those traditions might be 100 years old or 1,000 years old. It doesn't mean that that tradition is now exemplifying what the original truth teacher was talking about.
If we just go back to some of that, because it was one of the questions that came through in the social media this morning in the discussions, was that difference between religion and spirituality. And I know we've just had the census here in Australia, and so there was again one of those interesting points around, you know, having you could be religious, but you're also spiritual, or
right.
You believe in either. And I also, you know, highly respect everybody's different beliefs in this area. So if we focus on the spirituality side of it, what do you think would be some tips around helping people to focus on their spirituality and to focus on perhaps the purpose in their life around their spirituality for that success feeling and that motivation?
Well, first of all, there's the intention. You've got to have an intention to get to know yourself, to improve your life, to discover more of what often referred to as the truth. But I don't mean truth according to a belief system, truth according to your experience, and then your willingness to check out further about your experience. In other words, don't take it as gospel because something went right, but learn about it, discover it. I remember when I was 7 years old, I had an experience. I didn't know what it meant. So I decided I would find out then, because I couldn't get an explanation. No one could give me the answer to the experience. And then I just sat down one night.
That's a really good point, Andrew, that as a point for following, you know, the purpose and looking at spirituality,
yeah,
checking it out for yourself and your own experiences.
Yes.
Looking for that. So it's something that one of the spiritual teachers that we both know strongly encouraged people to do, was to
absolutely
and make their own decisions about whether it worked for you or not, given that for somebody else the exact same thing may not work. So
exactly,
it wasn't about the thing, it was about the checking it out so that you were, and I love this expression, you're your own kind of scientific discoverer or explorer.
Be the scientist.
Yeah.
You see, many years ago, there was a book by a guy called Robert Monroe. He called it Journeys Out of the Body. And he described a place in a certain location that he called Location 2 or something, where he ran headlong into an invisible wall. And I wondered about that. Later on, I found out about that invisible wall. It's in what we call the causal realm, or the realm of the emotions, which is a couple of realms or dimensions higher than this physical one that we're in. And you can't see it. It's a cautionary area, and you learn to pay attention. That's its purpose. So we have a lot of changes within us which occur inwardly and outwardly. So in some respect, it's a mirroring process. In another respect, it's, pay attention, because the way of the inner, the spirit of life is it's always showing you, but are you smart enough to catch the spirit? A lot of people predetermine the spirit, therefore they miss it. I had to learn to not do that because I got a very quick mind. And that wasn't sufficient because the spirit is way ahead of the mind. You know, there's a place that
Buddhists, I think, come in really well, because the Buddhists have that detachment from the mind, which a lot of spirituality also practices as well, around not getting caught up in your mind, but getting caught up in that experience that we're talking about.
Yeah. So you see, in the mental realm, there is a place that's very close to the unconscious realm, known as a universal mind. If you were to look at it, it's a big blue mass. And when you're coming into embodiment at your birth, on the way down, you as a spirit being, call it soul, the Atma, Surat, depending which language you're speaking from, you go there and they issue you a mind. It's like a signing out book. Now, that mind is according to your life plan, which is yours. You've made it. And then you take that and plug it in. So essentially, your mind is running through the bio-physio brain and operating this form, but the power behind it is the light of your own soul. If your soul leaves, the body drops. End of story.
A great, this may all sound a little bit very woo-woo and strange terms that Andrew is using. For anybody that is a little bit confused, then I highly recommend the Disney movie Soul, which actually explains a lot of what we're talking about.
Excellent.
In a really wonderful way, in a really simple way, that you can understand that distinction between. And I guess going back to that distinction, Andrew, as well, it's whether people have that belief system around we're a soul in a body having a spiritual experience,
right,
or a body having a spiritual experience, and the two kind of approaches can be quite different as well.
Yes, they are. And there is a book on that, by the way. It's called A Soul. It's not that the body has a soul, the soul has a body in the world. See, when you leave this world and the body stops, you don't actually die. So the value of learning that before you physically die is that you can get out of the body, have a look around, and then you know what's coming next before you die. There's a lot of fear around death, but it's an illusion field. And you can't have that proven.
Perhaps getting too far down into that space, coming back to some practical tips again around perhaps how to create that success mindset, keeping in mind your spirituality and your inner purpose, if you like. What would What do you think are some tips for people?
Yeah, there are a couple of really good ones that I recommend. And one of them is to remember there is no hurry. People often want to achieve quickly and hurriedly, and they jump into things. And along the way, they miss the point of the journey. It's not the goal necessarily, but the journey on the way, because that's where the learning is, as you probably know. The second thing I have is that to listen, watch, choose, make decisions. And then there's no perfect choices. They're excellent ones. And then choose again, course correct. Now, most people have heard these words, but how many stop to actually listen to what's in front of them, or as opposed to deciding what it is before they hear it? Thinking instead of listening. And the other one I've got here is review everything and adjust it. ultimately, for my younger self, I think you asked me a question, what would I say? I'd say be patient and relax, because your life is already in motion and it's not going to go away because you're in it.
People will actually see now how when I'm interviewing people, I've given them the questions beforehand to prepare. So thank you, Andrew, for reading through the answers. That's great. Just unpacking them a little bit more. I wholly agree about, it's about the journey. And if we go back to the distinction between whether we're a body with a soul or a soul with a body, I think one of the underlying things there, Andrea, that you were talking about was if we're a soul coming down into a body, then the world is like a classroom. And so it's important to enjoy the journey, enjoy the experiences, because all of the different experiences in the classroom are here for you to learn and to grow by. And I think that that's important for when you're creating that success mindset, because it comes back to sometimes you're not successful, but if you reframe it into, well, things didn't go great in that situation or circumstance, but I actually learnt this about myself and about that situation and circumstance. So constantly reframing it as a learning opportunity and a learning exercise.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've had a number of times in your life too, Andrew, where you've needed to do that.
Of course. And for what it's worth, this world is really like a kindergarten. And you do things slowly. Like if you're building a house or a car, it takes a while. In another dimension, you can do it pretty well instantly, but it might not be working yet. Like if you build a car, you kept putting 3 wheels on it. Here you get a chance to work it out in detail. So it's practice. But we have managed somehow through our time and space and lives to take it all too seriously. This is meant to be fun and a holiday.
Yeah, I do like the kindergarten analogy, because it's like the movie Soul and like having that childlike wonder in life.
Yeah.
Brings back that fun. And I like your other point around choosing. So when you choose and when you experiment and play, it's actually about the playfulness and the choosing. It's not necessarily about the outcome.
Right.
When we're talking about that inner purpose and that inner focus around success, it's actually neutral about the outcome, because it's the journey and the experience that is important.
Looking forward to the adventure rather than deciding on how it has to end. We have a thing called accountability and responsibility. And we can be responsible, but that doesn't resolve the issue. You have to move to the accountable position. That's part of the choosing. Accountable is like saying, okay, responsible, I spilled something on the floor. Accountable means, yes, I did it, and now I clean it up. That's the difference. So generally then, people don't always know that the accountable part is part B, and that helps you with your future choices after that. So you then go, right, listen, watch, gather, and don't buy into it through belief, but get your experience up there.
And that's come forward in many of the different spiritual types of books that I've read, this being accountable for your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions. You can see it also even in sports like karate and stands, and people that have mastered these types of things. They don't kind of blame outside circumstances or situations. They actually take accountability for their thoughts, their feelings, and their actions. And it's not always easy. It does, I think, take great courage at times to do that. But it also then, in many ways, puts you back in charge and in control of your thoughts and your feelings and your actions.
Yeah.
And are accountable for them.
And you are the one who's in charge, but not always are you choosing to know that.
Well, and I think that this is where each of those opportunities or those lessons throughout life, where we may not do as well as we would like to be doing in this circumstance, but it's not there as a punishment. It's actually there as a learning. And in that same way that we're talking today about, that inner purpose and that inner focus, it's always an opportunity to learn again and learn again and learn again. And I know that we both pretty much have the beliefs around, we keep learning and learning. It's not like you're going to ever learn and finish some of these lessons. It's a lifetime journey in it.
That's right. You're here until you're done. And if you're still here, you're not done. In simple terms.
Yeah,
and why am I back? Why am I here? Because we've all been here before. The answer is because you didn't get it then, you're back for another serve.
Yeah, so some people like reincarnation or rebodying, whatever label you want to use, believe that we haven't learnt those lessons, and that's where karma comes from. So we've come back to learn those other
That's right.
lessons. Yeah. And I think that tying it back into your life and your purpose and having that inner focus can really help to then see where perhaps outwardly in your life and in your world, things may not be quite correct, connecting or working. If you take that step back and look at it from that bigger purpose and bigger inner purpose, then you may see that sometimes it's that course correction around.
Yeah, it's feedback.
Feedback, yeah.
Feedback from your universe or from the spirit that you're slightly off course. You see, when a plane flies from, say, Sydney to Los Angeles, very rarely is it on course. There's a mechanism there called autopilot, and that only corrects the direction when it goes off course. We're the same. We learn through feedback our true direction. And for me, to bottom line everything, if I leave the body tonight, I know where I'm going. I don't have a fear of death. I just don't. That disappeared first time I got out of my body as an adult. So there's benefits to all this, that knowing, that awareness, that trust of now your own experience. I've been there. I know what's out there. That's a big deal. Most people are terrified of death,
Yeah, and that fear of death or fear of being hurt or the unknown can actually hold people back. So I'm
absolutely
hoping that in hearing some of what we've talked about today, it'll actually encourage people to think of life more as that playground and the adventure ground that they can explore in. Fabulous. And Andrew, I know that you don't necessarily have a presence on LinkedIn, so where is the best place for people to get hold of you if they want to ask more questions?
Probably Facebook. If you drop me a question on Facebook, I'll be happy to answer it.
Fabulous. So that's Andrew St. John is how you can get hold of him on Facebook.
Yeah.
And if you were to give one final message to viewers today about, at your wonderful older age and you've retired and everything, what would
I'm 75.
What would be one piece of advice that you might give to people who are perhaps a bit younger or a bit troubled about following their own life's path? What advice would you give them?
I would say to remember that your life is in order already. There is nothing to fear because the ultimate place of your life is perfect love. And that love is who you really are.
Wow, what a fabulous place to finish. And thank you so much today for coming on the show, Andrew. I really appreciate coming out of retirement to be on the show and share your insights with everyone.
Maybe we can do it again sometime.
Definitely.
All right.
And to everybody else, I really hope that you've enjoyed yet again a very different look at what it is that can create a mindset for success. And I really hope that some of what Andrew and I have talked about today can help you with creating that mindset into living a happier and healthier life. And until next week, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.